So I know a lot of us are probably taking Sociology 101 because it is now an MCAT requirement. And this is because the AAMC has decided that they want doctors who are more personable. And to some degree, this makes sense. So with us potentially aspiring to be doctors one day, it also makes sense to discuss the role of professionalization in medicine. So let's first seek to define what professionalization even means. So in the paper, The Management of Professionalism, A Contemporary Paradox by Julia Evitz of the University of Nottingham, y'all can feel free to look her up if you don't believe my definition here, defines professionalization as the process to pursue, develop, and maintain the closure of the occupational group. And that's pretty similar to what we discussed in class. So let's break that down and first discuss the first part of this definition, the process to pursue, develop, and maintain. So this is basically this entire group of professionals, in our case it is physicians, who are working together to make sure that the status quo is maintained, pursue, develop, and maintain. So to achieve this status quo and then maintain it. And what is the proximate goal of that? Well, the second half of the definition, the closure of the occupational group, which basically means sealing out those that cannot obtain this standard of professionalism that this group expects of its. So the building you see here is actually the headquarters of the American Medical Association located in Chicago. And this is, without a doubt, the best example of an organization that is involved in the professionalization of medicine. What exactly does the AMA do? I'm sure most of you have heard of it, but it basically sets the standards for practicing medicine and acts as the overall lobbying group for physicians. That being said, while it acts as this overall voice, and it is a great example of the professionalization of medicine, it is not what is ultimately responsible for it. It speaks for physicians, but the AMA itself does not specifically license physicians. It just sets the standards for what should be expected of physicians, what is acceptable for physicians to practice and do, such as if the AMA basically says that prescribing medical marijuana is not a good idea, most physicians won't do it. And that's because the professionalization of medicine is not just the legal aspect of it, but it also deals with the taboos of it. So we read in Conley his interpretation of quack physicians, right? And those were ones that basically did what others looked down upon in order to please their patients. So in setting the status quo for physicians, the AMA is also providing a framework for those to be labeled quacks. So physicians that don't abide by the generalized standard that the AMA provides will, as such, be labeled quacks. So then this begs the question, at what level is the professionalization of medicine actually obtained? And that is at the state licensure board level. So upon graduating medical school, most, if not all, doctors will end up taking what's called the board, right? And that is an exam that basically makes a physician termed board certified. This is not 100% necessary, but most physicians that aren't board certified will not be hired anywhere, will have just a very difficult time practicing medicine. And then the other aspect of that is the state licensure boards. So for each state you want to practice medicine in, you have to individually apply for a license to practice medicine there. And that includes a holistic review of your entire career as a physician. But if you have not passed your boards, the chances are you won't be able to get a license there, among other things. You also criminal record factors into this. There are a whole slew of things that could keep you from getting your medical license. And so the medical licensure board is the primary unit of professionalization in medicine. If you do not get a medical license in a specific state, you cannot practice medicine there. And there are a whole number of ways that you can be excluded from practicing medicine. And so the medical board, and pictured here I have the North Carolina Medical Board, is where the professionalization of medicine actually occurs, where those that are not worthy to practice medicine are excluded from doing so, where we take this group of individuals who are already pretty privileged, right? They're already held in high esteem, and make the standard for them even higher so that we can hold them in even higher esteem and so that we can truly trust what they are doing with our health. So, is the practice of medicine declining, as Conley likes to claim towards the end of his chapter? I agree that the rise of the internet, which makes people more able to seek second opinions on their conditions, does to some degree make an individual physician's power of prescription maybe a little bit weaker. But at the end of the day, these strict licensing standards that we apply to our physicians and even the esteem that we hold them in still gives them great power over our health and wellness. And so as long as this professionalization of medicine continues, I think physicians will continue to be held in such high regard and will continue to have inordinate power compared to other professionals. Because even comparing like a physician's assistant to a full physician, yes, a physician's assistant can still prescribe. We will not hold them in as high regard as we do physicians just because of the rigor it takes to become licensed as a physician. You look at other professions which have professionalization. You look at accountants. You look at lawyers. Oftentimes we view them as a dime a dozen, and usually finding out someone is an accountant or a lawyer does not change our perception of them. But when you find out that a random stranger that you're talking to is a physician, suddenly you view them in a whole other light. That, and in addition to that, it almost seems like Conley demonizes physicians for, professionalizing their role and making it so exclusive. But I would argue that that is for the better. We don't want these quacks practicing medicine like Conley claims, and we want the occupation to be limited. That's not saying that having a lot of doctors is a bad thing. In fact, it's a great thing. But we shouldn't. Having these standards is important because you don't want someone who is unqualified treating your illnesses. You want doctors to be held to the highest regard by their internal organization. Does them setting the rules kind of play into their hand? Certainly, but no one should. It shouldn't be up to everyday people to determine what the standards for physicians are. I think it's perfectly fine to leave that power up to the physicians. You wouldn't have a farmer running the economy. You leave that up to economists, and it makes it so it's hard to question what they say. But I would argue that that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, these are the ones who are trained to deal with your health, much like the economists are trained to predict what happens with the economy. So in evaluating the role of professionalization in medicine, I would say that professionalization is a very strong factor in determining health policy in the United States, because at the end of the day, what doctors say goes. But I would not be an advocate of changing up this system. Now I want to evaluate quickly one specific claim that we did on one of the worksheets, and that is we think doctors are special because of the masteries of their skill and necessary to become a doctor. And I personally think, as I have stated throughout this entire presentation, I think this is a very weak claim. We do not think doctors are special because of the mastery of their skills necessary to become a doctor. We think doctors are special because of the importance of their role in society. The mastery of skills is obviously a huge factor of that, but it's not the only thing. It is the fact that the most important thing to a person is how healthy they are, how long they live, because it affects so many other aspects of things that they think is important, their family, their career, all of those things. So doctors hold a special place in our society because they make us feel better. They make us not be sick. They make us able to go to work and provide for our families. And while Conley does state that other things such as health, nutrition, and those kinds of things are more important than the role of the physician, I just think that's completely blasphemous. And I may be a little biased because I want to go to medical school and I have an interest in health policy. But it is to me, it is um, it's just kind of ludicrous to think that way. It's ignorant of the fact that doctors have such a strong position in terms of lobbying, in terms of setting the health policy. Uh, and I just don't think Conley is accounting for that. I think he's seeing these groups of physicians as a very exclusive class that tries to keep it so people can't be in their class. Whereas the way I see it, it is a class. It is still this exclusive group of people, but what they're trying to do is spread their knowledge and disseminate it so that the greater portion of the population can be healthy.